Some people think that doing school different is just clever words. It's not. The truth is, if you're really going to reimagine education, you're also signing up for trouble. And often that's at the hands of your colleagues. Because when you bring play and passion and real world purpose into your classroom, like having fourth graders write persuasive letters that literally get shelter dogs adopted, you're not changing just lessons, you're exposing everybody else's comfort with the status quo. And insecure adults, they don't clap for that. They hate it. They attack it. The stakes are massive. If you let that toxicity dim your light, kids miss out on the magic only you can create. If you stay small and safe, your school keeps preparing kids for a world that doesn't even exist anymore. But if you keep shining and learn how to handle the punches that come with being a ruckus maker, you don't just rescue dogs, you rescue students and staff and even yourself from a boxed in version of school and life. Today's episode is a masterclass in that kind of courage. My guest is Kim Strobel, a former teacher and school leader turned global happiness and well-being consultant. She's a keynote speaker and author of Teach Happy: Small Steps to Big Joy. She helps educators reclaim their joy and build schools where both adults and kids can thrive. We'll talk about what to do when your innovation makes colleagues uncomfortable, why productive struggle is non-negotiable both for kids and adults, how a debilitating panic disorder turned into a platform to talk about happiness with thousands, and the 5 happiness habits every school leader needs to build a campus worth showing up for. I'm Danny Bauer. This is Better Leaders, Better Schools, the original Ruckus cast for innovative leaders who want to do school different. That means reimagining this project of school even within a traditional setting so that we create campus experiences worth showing up for. Thanks to Ruckus Makers just like you, this show ranks in the top 1% of all podcasts worldwide. So thanks for pressing play. Thanks for engaging today. And we'll be right back after a few messages from our show sponsors. Looking to create the kind of campus experience students never forget? ODP Business Solutions transforms ordinary spaces into extraordinary learning environments. Visit odpbusiness.com/education and let's do school different. That's odpbusiness.com/education. This episode is sponsored by Play Piper. Teachers know that keeping kids engaged in STEM can be tough. Piper's here to help. Our award-winning STEM kits make science and engineering hands-on, playful, and fun, so students build confidence while building real skills. Join educators across the country who are using Piper to inspire future creators. Get started at playpiper.com/ruckus. That's playpiper.com/ruckus. If you could differentiate instruction in 20 minutes or less, would you do it for all your students? Well, you can with IXL. Over 1 million teachers use IXL because it empowers them to use effective data-informed instruction. And you can get started today at ixl.com/leaders. That's ixl.com/leaders. All right, and Kim, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Danny. Happy to be here.
Great. So I was joking. I mean, this is true. You had colleagues, they were dog haters for some reason. You had students partner with an animal shelter, I guess, and saved a bunch of dogs, but your colleagues did get upset. Now, you have 3 dogs. My pups here, our dogs are on the show too. What was going on with these people in the story?
Yeah, I feel like I've just always been somebody who isn't afraid to do things differently. And for me, that manifested in many ways in my own classroom, Danny.
Mm.
I was always trying to learn how to bring innovation and play and magic to my classroom. And I was trying to learn non-traditional methods of teaching. So it was everything from that Strobel girl doesn't have those kids in seats and they're laughing and they're playing and they're learning to read in small groups. And what is she doing to the fact that, one of my fourth grade standards was persuasive writing. And so I have this love of animals. I've now rescued and saved 247 dogs. And so
Wow.
at the time, I thought, how do I bring some of my outside passions and mirror that with my content? And I think Dave Burgess and the Teach Like a
There
Pirate
they
thing.
are.
Yeah, there's the dogs, how dare a bird fly across the room, Danny. And so I was really about, how do I bring this passion and play and mirror it with my content? So I came up with the idea that my kids could kind of co-adopt a cat or a dog from the local animal shelter. And we would go to the shelter, and they would interact, and they would learn about its personality traits. And then they would come back and they would write a persuasive letter to a prospective owner saying, hi,
Mm,
my name is Theodore. I'm a black lab. I'm about 2 years old. I'm really feisty and frisky, and I love to play. And they just brought tremendous voice and passion to their writing. And it was a great way to teach persuasive writing. And the kids absolutely loved that. And so then what we would do is we would take the persuasive writing paragraphs, and we put posters up all around our city with the picture of the animal that needed adopted and a little piece about that animal's personality. And we would hear like, oh, this person came in and saw the poster at the movie theater and they adopted Theodore, and we just want your class to
mm,
know. And then we'd be like, Eli, Theodore was yours. You got him into a new home. And so I started to notice that, like, teachers, not all, but many around me, did not like that Kim Strobel was doing things differently. They did not like that Kim Strobel didn't teach reading in the traditional way. They did not like that Kim Strobel liked to dress up and wear cute clothes to work, because they would rather me wear my khakis and collared shirt. But I loved dressing up and feeling good in clothes. They did not like that we started to do this work with the animal shelter. So I actually started to get like majorly toxicity and sort of like that adult bullying that began to
mm,
take place, because I was kind of getting this attention from students and other parents and school leaders who were kind of asking me, like, can you talk about what you're doing in your classroom, Kim? Can you, share some of the strategies that are working? And Danny, I hate to say this, but I now, like, my old principal is a dear friend of mine, and we both say, like, that was really hard. Like, we would maybe never do that again, because a lot of
mm,
times, teachers are fixed mindset oriented too, Danny. And I had some around me that were very insecure. And so what I was doing was shining a light on things maybe that they weren't doing. And I never understood that, because I've always been the person in the room, Danny, that says, put me around 5 people that are so much better than me. I mean, when I
mhm,
first got my teaching job, I said, put me next to the best teacher you have in the whole school so I can learn everything that that teacher is doing. But what I've come to understand, and maybe it was the small community I lived in, I have heard this is being said of other schools, but people were really threatened by another person's success. And it made life for me as a teacher, to be honest with you, incredibly difficult.
yeah, for sure. What advice do you have for, ruckus maker engaging with this content, listening or watching, and they're trying to shine, they want to do school different, as I say, and be creative, innovative, meet kids where they're at, right? And create an experience that they're excited to engage in, right? It's a reason, it's a draw, it's a hook to come to school,
Yeah.
but they're getting that pushback or toxicity from peers. Like, what would you say to them?
I would say, first of all, you have to honor your own light and how you want to show up. And I always just said, I'm not going to follow the so-called boxed in way that we say you're supposed to operate in this school. I don't want my kids to be boxed in. I don't want to be boxed in as a teacher. And so what I began to do, Danny, is I began to find my people that some were even outside
Mm,
of the school, that we
right.
were mentoring and sharing ideas and rooting for one another, and putting great books in our hands and sharing these ideas with one another. And once I found my pod of people who were not afraid to go against the status quo,
Mm,
then I felt like so fueled and so energized. And honestly, it's a big part of the work that I do today, because it's kind of like everything that we see with the Apple commercials. Their whole motto was, we do things differently.
mm,
And if you're going to be a ruckus maker, if you're going to change, if you're going to ignite change and spark curiosity and creativity and innovation, then what I've decided, Danny, is you got to be somebody that can handle the punches that come with that. And so
Mhm.
I'll handle the punches all day long because I'm going to show up and I'm going to do what feels right with who Kim Strobel is and what I see gets results with students.
Yeah, right on. I appreciate that. And the nod to Apple too, people that were paying attention and knew some of their slogans from the past. I think it was "Think Different." I want to say, yeah, and that's where "Do School Different" actually came from, right? So when I was thinking about that Ruckus Maker, Do School Different point of view, it was inspired a lot by Apple and their messaging and how they put it out there. But that's how I want yeah, the audience to feel. We can reimagine this project of school, even within a traditional setting, so that we create campus experiences worth showing up for. That's what it means to do school different. So,
Yeah. And you
talk
can
to me.
stay on your
Oh,
lily
go ahead.
pad. That's the thing, Danny, is like you can choose to stay on your lily pad and stay safe and never have any kind of confrontation. But those have never been the people that ignite change in the world. The people that ignite change know that they're going to get some pushback, that
Mhm.
they're going to feel a little bit uncomfortable. They're going to have to take a little heat. But we decide in the end that it's worth it.
Well, it's part of what you're signing up for, right? There's nobody who had like a legendary impact on the world, even for a short period of time, that didn't go through some kind of challenge, right? Like, and the thing is that there's people that have big dreams, high aspirations, and they wanna go out and do that. And it's really easy to talk about it. Doing it is certainly different. But when you think it's gonna be an easy path, that's so stupid. Like it,
Yes.
it's
Who
just
wants
it.
easy? We want
Well,
growth. We want growth.
we want growth, but and listen, when I say stupid, sometimes I default this way. I might not want all the struggle, right, and all the challenge, but that's literally what you're signing up for, especially if you are carving a sort of a new path. Like that's never an easy road. There's literally nobody in history that's done anything legendary that they tell their story and they're like, yeah, for 30 years, it was really easy. Like that's never been said. But yet our mindsets, we might think like, oh man, it should be easier. No, it shouldn't. That's a part of it, right?
Yeah.
And I know you like talking about productive struggle. Like why is this so important?
Oh my gosh, it's so important on so many levels. And when I look at, I mean, Danny, I know I'm an anomaly here, but like I'm somebody who's had a ton of productive struggle in my life. And I wish at times it had been easier for me. But it's like when I was teaching fourth grade and we would get these caterpillars in every spring and the kids would
Mhm.
watch them turn into butterflies. And I can't remember now if the process is 14 days or 21 days, but like the kids and I would literally look at that little caterpillar. And I mean, it was making zero headway. And I remember thinking if I just took a little slit and put that little slit in the cocoon, I could free the butterfly, right? And it was agonizing to me and the kids. But part of what we were learning is that if that butterfly does not, or that caterpillar turning into the butterfly does not have the productive struggle, if it doesn't have to fight over and over and over to get its way out of the cocoon, it's going to be born with deformed wings and it will wither and die.
Mm.
And I have found in my own life, as much of some of my intense suffering that I've had at times, and we can talk about that. I've had, some struggles around anxiety and panic disorder myself, but the ability to get uncomfortable and to have that productive struggle makes you come out the other side and you are a changed person. You have now grown yourself. And that's what I want for school leaders. That's what I want for the teachers in this school to embrace. And that's what I want for our students. But we are really good, Danny, at touting like these kids just aren't gritty anymore. They're just not gritty. They don't have that ability to overcome obstacles and they want to give up as soon as anything gets hard. And I'm going to
Mhm.
tell you what, Danny, I have found like I learned to play pickleball this past year and I was
Okay.
cussing on the court. I'm screaming, I'm yelling. And my husband says, what about this thinks you're supposed to know how to naturally do this right out of the gate? And I thought, oh, that was like Kim Strobel's grittiness isn't always there either.
Mhm. For sure. So yeah, thanks for saying that you struggle with like panic and worry, anxiety. That I think a lot of leaders do. They might not be at a place to admit it, but I think it was so debilitating at times. It was even hard for you to go out to the mailbox. But these
Yeah.
days, you're speaking on stages, and there might be 15,000 in the crowd, and that kind of thing. That's quite a change. So, how did you overcome that or navigate it, or how are you still dealing with it? I don't know.
Yeah.
So.
Well, when I speak, I tell people that, the research is very strong that about 75% of school teachers experience high levels of stress, and about
Mm,
84% of school leaders experience high levels of stress. And so when our brain is pinging at stressed all of the time, Danny, we really are losing productivity levels. We're losing engagement levels. We're losing creativity levels. But for me, my story actually starts out like I was kind of always a little bit of a nervous type of kid. My brain always worked on overdrive, but it kind of came to a catalyst when I was a sophomore in high school. I had what we now know as a panic attack that went
mm,
undiagnosed for years. But I was full blown into debilitating panic disorder with agoraphobia. So from about age 16 to about age 24, I struggled to do the most basic of things like drive my car 30 seconds away from my house, go to the grocery store, walk in the grocery store, walk to my mailbox. It's just insane to think about because the normal person who hasn't struggled from panic disorder just can't wrap their brain around this fear. But I tell
sure.
people that it's like, absolute terror where you don't feel safe in your body and your brain, and everything feels strange and obscure. And so for
Mhm.
me, I ended up eventually, like 7 years later, getting a diagnosis of panic disorder with agoraphobia. And so I did cognitive behavioral therapy, which was so intense. Like every day for the next 7 days, Kim, you're going to leave your house and you're going to drive to the Walmart parking lot, and you cannot leave until your wheels touch that parking lot. And I would have said, saw my right arm off right now because that feels a lot easier than what you're asking me to do. But then it was like week 2, now you're gonna stand in Walmart and count to 10 before you can leave. Now you're gonna and so I entered into cognitive behavioral therapy. I did get on some life-saving anxiety medicine. But the third thing that happened to me, Danny, is I'm gonna say this was around 1997, because I'm 51 now, and the personal development field was coming to fruition, and I began to read every single book I could on how do I get control of my thoughts, actions, and behaviors, and how to do I rework the inner wiring of Kim Strobel so that I get those outside results. And I now see like and then I think 15 years ago, Danny, I stumbled around the topic of happiness and well-being, and I discovered and became on fire with understanding that we can have these high stress demanding jobs. We can have these challenges that we're facing day in and day out with the complex needs and behaviors of our students, the staff, the high absenteeism, the behaviors, and we actually have more control and agency over our happiness and well-being than what we really know. And so I tell everybody I took 28 flights from mid-July to end of August, and 26 of the 28 flights was to talk about the science of happiness and well-being and
Mm.
education because we feel like we're drowning.
Yeah, you see that so much, right? Or you hear that so much, especially when you're out there talking, or, for me, coaching school leaders and just hearing how they're doing or their staff, right? And that it's out there. It's tough. It's a tough industry. In that, sitting in the challenge, I think you have two paths, right? Like you could play the role of the victim, and you could play the role of what I call the ruckus maker. I think you might say warrior potentially. But can you talk to us about those sort of like two paths and two avatars or personalities that people can choose?
Absolutely, and I think that's the whole piece is, like, what we know is that life can be really unfair, like, bad
Hmm,
things happen, and we don't always honor and know, Danny, the challenges that as human beings, the people in our school buildings are facing, even the ones that we're walking by daily with a smile on their face who are showing up day in and day out. I work with a lot of school leaders, I do a lot of, like, school admin conferences, And we
Mhm.
don't talk about the hard because like we're at the helm, we're supposed to be leading the way. But what I find a lot of the times is that in order to get to where we're going, we have to observe the messy parts of who we are. And so I think just understanding that we can always play victim and that never helps any of us. And so what
Mm.
I say is I want to take us like I want to acknowledge the hard. I will call a spade all day long. This profession, like I was a former school leader, I couldn't work enough hours to get the job done. I felt like my plate was just overflowing and puking. And at times I was
Yep.
so burned out that I couldn't get myself even emotionally regulated. But what I know is that when we can stop seeing and blaming, we blame the kids, we blame the school system, we blame the state, we blame the politicians. And guess what? I will be the first to say those things are many times extreme challenges. But once I learned, Danny, that I had to take 100% responsibility for my life, that
Exactly
yeah,
that.
me and only me, right? And
Yeah.
that's empowering. And so I tell people that, like, I want to shift you to your own personal power, your own personal agency, because more of how you feel, not just in your job and your work life, but even all the other important pieces, you have much more control over that than what you think.
100%. I've worked with I've worked with lots of coaches over the years, but two coming to mind recently, a guy named Ron and another guy named Adam. Ron loves this YouTube. I don't know if you've ever seen it by Jocko, and it's just called Good. And he was a Navy SEAL. Now he has his own podcast, and it's about like extreme ownership and this kind of stuff. But the punchline of the video, right, is like he's going through all the stuff that you can imagine a Navy SEAL or somebody in the military, the adversity that they'll face at times, right? And whether it's a good thing, a bad thing, his response was always good, right? And then the same thing with Adam. It wasn't necessarily the Jocko YouTube, but as he was talking, this was a business space, and you're out there and you want to serve more people and scale your business and all that kind of stuff. The market doesn't always respond in the way that you would like, right? And there's experiments that you run or programs you might put out there, and people say, well, I'm not joining this for whatever reason, right? He says that's great because it's giving you data, it's giving you feedback, and now we could begin to adjust, right?
Mm.
And so, and I think this is a bit about what Brene Brown, quoting Teddy Roosevelt, was talking about. Like when you're in the arena, you're doing it, and then you can grow and you can become more resilient from that. Versus again, just like talking about it and that kind of thing. So, I want to ask you, like, and please feel free to disagree with me here. I know that a ruckus maker leading a campus can certainly impact and should think deeply about culture and organizational health, right? And I love playing with paradoxes. So, with that being said, I also think they're not responsible for their staff's happiness. Like, that's kind of the individual's responsibility. But there's things you can do to sort of like promote it. But, how I want to know if you agree or disagree. It doesn't matter which way you go. And I'd love to know how a ruckus maker can bring more happiness to their staff.
Well, I love this question, and I think it's a bit of both, in my opinion. And
Hmm.
I want to actually explain what the happiness research says first, if that's okay, so that we can create a foundation for how I want to answer your question. And so, what we know, and here's the thing: happiness was frivolous at one time, Danny. I mean, Lee Iacocca, who ran Chrysler, said, "If you smile, if you laugh, if you play on the job, you're fired."
Oh gosh. Yeah.
And
Fire me quickly then because I would not fit here.
no, right. Yeah, me neither. And so, I tell people like the science of happiness, and I want to paint the road for why happiness needs to be a priority for a person in their own life and
Hmm.
why it needs to be a priority for the culture of the school. And why we aren't responsible for the individual people in who work in the school. They're responsible for their own happiness, but they're also many times they don't know what they can do to increase their happiness levels. And so sometimes as school leaders, a lot of the work that I do is teaching them how to create those cultures where they're leading with the happiness and joy as the blueprint that becomes a part of the fabric of, I always say, like, happy teachers plus happy students equals happy schools. And
Yeah.
why are happy schools important? And so if you think of your happiness, we all have what's called a set baseline happiness level, Danny. So maybe mine is down here and maybe your baseline is a little bit higher. And what this means is that good things happen in our life. I don't know, Danny, maybe you and I, have something really good happen. We get a new job, we get a new house, our kid gets into college, we go on vacation, we take a day off and go golfing, whatever it is, we get a little boost in happiness. And that boost
Mm.
in happiness might last 2 hours, 2 days, 2 months, whatever. We know it's going to go up, but it's always going to come right back to whatever your baseline is. And
Mm.
where the positive psychology that comes into play says is that the same is true, Danny, for when we endure really hard things in our life. We can have loss and grief and illness and unfair circumstances. We can have difficult things in our life and our happiness levels will drop. But crazy enough, as humans, we almost always recalibrate back to our baseline. And so then
Mm.
this begs the question, well, why does Danny have a higher baseline than Kim? Why, when he fluctuates, his is always a little bit higher? And so what we know from the research from Sonia Lubermisky and Sean Aker and Martin Seligman is that if you think of your happiness as a pie chart, what we know is that 50% of your long-term happiness is genetic, Danny.
Mm.
Genetic. And so when I
Parents.
say this, I literally watch 80% of the people in the audience put their head down and I hear murmurings of like, I'm so screwed.
Dang it, mom.
They got it. Like, yeah,
Dad.
I know, right? And they're like worried. They're like, 50% is genetic. And I'm like, look,
Yeah.
you have a wiring to your brain that came somewhat genetically from your mom or your dad. And you either are an optimist or a pessimist or somewhere along the line. But
Mhm.
but don't lose hope with me yet. Like that is 50%. It sounds kind of high. I personally believe in epigenetics. So I kind of think that we can have genes that are wired towards a certain way, but we can adopt habits and behaviors that decide whether or not those genes get turned on. But that's a different conversation. So where I think the happiness research gets very interesting is we can take every circumstance, Danny, that a human has had. What kind of home did they grow up in? Were their parents married, single, divorced, or widowed? Did they have money? Did they not? Were they popular? Were they not? We can take every external circumstance that a human has and we can throw that into the pie. What kind of job do they have? What kind of car do they have? What kind of money do they make? And it says that those external circumstances only account for about 10% of
Mm.
long-term happiness. But if you're like Kim Strobel, you're going to let some teachers, some students, some parents, some people steal way more than 10% for far too long.
Yeah.
And so I tell people that's where you start to see like I'm choosing to let this situation or this experience rob me of my happiness. And that in and of itself is kind of eye-opening because I mean, even hearing that, Danny, are you kind of like surprised by that low number?
The 10% piece?
Yeah.
Mm, yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Potentially. But I agree that there's
You
so
can
much
see.
like you can yeah, in terms
Yeah.
of like what you control. Cause I there's times certainly that things could be dark for me, but often I am optimistic, like, you know, we're gonna be able to figure this out, right?
Yeah.
There might be some pouting and some cussing prior to that, but directionally and generally speaking, I have a this is figure outable sort of mindset, you
Wow.
know?
Yeah. What a
So I might
gift
I might need a
that is.
minute, but it's okay, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so what fuels me the most, Danny, is that if 50% is genetic and 10% is our external circumstances,
Mhm,
that leaves 40% of the pie. And
mhm,
every human being has the ability to increase their happiness and well-being levels by up to 40%. And it has to do with these three things: the thoughts you're thinking, the actions you're taking, and the behaviors or the habits that you have in your life. And so when I wrote Teach Happy, Small Steps to Big Joy, that focuses all on that 40%. And I think a lot of people listening are kind of like, okay, this is great, Kim, but like, how is this going to make my teachers show up differently? How's this going to make my staff? How's this going to make our culture? Like, okay, I get it. You're responsible for your happiness, but what does that really have to do with anything? And so,
Hmm.
what we also know is that we've all been fed this formula for success, Danny, that says if you want to be happy in your life, you're going to go to school, you're going to work really hard, you're going to try to be at the top of your class, and you're going to get really good grades. Because if you can do that, you can get into a really good college, and you better be going to college. I mean, that's another old social script, right? You better be going to
Hmm.
college. Now, once you get in college, you're competing with thousands and thousands. So you really got to put your head to the grindstone, because once you get out of college, we want you to land the good job, because if you can land the good job, you can make the good paycheck. And if you can make the good paycheck, you can afford the things in life that lead to a very happy and successful life. And this is around us, and it's a part of all of who we are. But the last 40 years of positive psychology research proves that that formula is absolutely backward, Danny. That if you want to become more successful in your life, if you want to become more abundant in your life, if you want to feel better in your marriage, your health, your recreation, your spirituality, if you want to have a feel good life, it
Hmm.
is not after you achieve all of these things, now you've arrived at happiness. What we actually know from the research is that when we teach people how to prioritize their happiness and well being, then and only then do we start to move the lever in every single area of their lives. And so when they begin to cultivate a set of happiness habits, what happens, Danny, is we start to rewire the brain with that 40% that is up for grabs. Because what we know is that when we can get your employees' brains to positive more than negative, neutral, or stressed, they're going to be 31% more productive at their job. When
Hmm.
we can get their brains to positive versus negative, neutral, or stressed, they're going to be 10 times more engaged in their job and 3 times more creative. That, Danny, is why I'm not being laughed at anymore out of organizations, schools. I mean, I did this work with the FBI last year, the most
Yeah.
jaded people in the whole wide world, and rightfully so. And they were eating out of the palm of my hand because they
Mm.
learned that they have the ability to actually rewire their brain regardless of the input that's coming at them. And so I always tell people that when we do this, when we really create this culture that has the fabric and woven cloth of happiness being a priority, then it changes how we're showing up in and out of our lives. It changes how you're showing up in your marriage, your partnership. It changes how you're showing up in your parenting life. And so, going back to your original question, 100%, I am responsible for Kim Strobel's happiness. But what I love to see in the schools is when happiness is a priority and they're cultivating happiness habits with their students, with their teachers, with their custodians, with their secretaries, and they're creating this atmosphere that says we actually know how to shift our brain to what's going really well a whole lot of the time.
Right on. ODP Business Solutions, formerly Office Depot Business Solutions Division, has been a trusted partner for schools for 30 years. At ODP Business Solutions, we're by your side to meet your evolving education needs. Now, picture this: a learning environment so engaging students forget to check their phones. Sounds impossible? That's exactly what we helped the Lago Academy create. Their secret? Working with ODP Business Solutions to build collaborative spaces that actually work. We didn't just deliver furniture, we delivered a completely new way of learning. From tech integration that makes lessons come alive, to flexible spaces that adapt to any teaching style, to sustainable solutions that reduce your carbon footprint. We're here to help you do school different. And the best part, you get it all from a single supplier, all to help you simplify ordering and streamline budgeting while staying compliant with easy access to cooperative contracts. However you want to advance, ODP Business Solutions has 30 years of experience helping districts like yours get ahead. Visit odpbusiness.com/education to learn more. That's odpbusiness.com/education. Tomorrow's innovators are sitting in classrooms today, but only if we can help them see what's possible. At Piper, we make STEM hands-on and approachable through kits that connect kids' natural curiosity with real skills in coding and engineering. Students who once thought, I'm not good at science, begin to discover on their own, they discover their potential. It's about repairing the pipeline and fueling the next generation of creators. To learn how you can inspire future innovators in your school and Ruckus Makers, visit playpiper.com/ruckus. That's playpiper.com/ruckus. As a school leader, time is your greatest resource, and there is a real sense of urgency when it comes to getting students what they need right now. That's why I love IXL's Universal Screener. In 20 minutes or less, you can identify students in need of intervention. And IXL's Learning Adaptive platform makes differentiating instruction easy. As students learn, IXL adjusts to the right level of difficulty for each individual student. Get started today at ixl.com/leaders. That's ixl.com/leaders. Is that where the happiness habits come in when it comes to that 40% and sort of the,
Yeah.
choices you can make and the
Yeah, and I can give
routines?
you the
So,
top 5 if you want, if we have time, and I can go deep into maybe one of them with you, but, there's a top 5 that we know really works to kind of recalibrate the brain. And you and I were actually talking about one of them before we got on here, which is it's move your body. Danny, the research
mhm.
is so strong. If you move your body 30 minutes a day, it's amazing what that does not only for your stress levels, dopamine levels, oxytocin levels, the chemicals flowing through your brain, but it actually allows you to handle your stress in a much more productive way, and it elevates that baseline happiness level. And you were telling me before how, you've got this pretty disciplined, structured routine that tends to serve you very well when it comes to your own exercise routine.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's some research around like 6,000 or 6,500 steps. I know 10K is like a nice goal to have, but I think the bare minimum, if you're doing like 6,500 steps a day, you tend to have less worry, anxiety, depression, like all the stuff that you don't want. Like folks just tend to not have it. And so get out there and move. And that's really important too, because, I do some pretty intense training which can be taxing on the body. You got to be smart about recovery. But when you're thinking steps, like that's easy. Most people can do that quite easily. Not all, I understand, but a lot of us can, right? And so if you in that bucket, like stop making excuses and just get your butt outside. And like I don't even have excuses here in Syracuse where there's feet and feet of snow, right? I got nice LL Bean boots, and my dogs have boots, so we can get out there and be safe. We also have a walking pad that we got on Amazon. It wasn't even like a full-fledged treadmill. It's like a little, pretty small one that was inexpensive. But I was watching football Sunday, and I realized, oh, I'm just like lounging, which is also okay. You need to recover. But then my watch said, "Oh, you've gotten 6,000 to 10,000 steps today." So I got up, threw on the walking pad, and I was just walking, watching the guys, compete. It was great. And then you get to your goal, and you feel great. You feel good about that too, watching the show and getting your steps in. So yeah,
Yeah, there's a lot of
move your
research,
body.
Danny, around all of that. And even they've done research comparing physical exercise to SSRIs, antidepressants. And we find
Mm,
that people who exercise and incorporate some resistance training, they actually get more from that than they do an antidepressant. Not that you can't combine the two together, but
sure.
and the other thing I tell people, I don't know if you know this, I mean, Danny, I'm all about into super aging, and I'm into Peter Attia and his book Outlive and how do we feel
Okay.
good in our 60s, 70s and beyond. But when
Sure.
you exercise, it changes the mitochondria in
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
cells, and it reverse ages you by 7 years.
Well, let me tell you this. So, just imagine the average adult in the United States, and that you have that, and let's say over 50, right? And I think about this a lot because my mom's 78, and I love her. I had the pleasure to live in Antwerp, Belgium, a few different places in Netherlands, and then Glasgow, Scotland. But in Belgium and Netherlands, those are like big cycling, right? Communities. And to see folks that are older than me, right? Like my mom's age, still on bikes, right? And getting around, it actually it caused some discomfort and some pain and sadness because I want that for her,
Yeah.
but she doesn't have that. And that's the reality. And
I
there's
know.
nothing I can do to like challenge and be like, Mom, get up, like walk with me, right?
You
Like
and I
I
have the
try.
same moms. We have the
Yeah.
same moms, and we love them dearly, but my mom she'll choose comfort every day of the week, even though, like,
Yeah.
I totally get it. And by the
But
way,
basic,
I gotta share a new thing I'm into,
sure.
the weighted vest.
Yeah,
Have you
yeah,
tried the
sure.
weighted vest yet? I've been
No, I
walking.
haven't done that or rucking, with weights in a backpack. But yeah, last thing I'll say is that I want that for myself. It's within my control, right? So
Yes.
knock on wood, that's stuff I don't get hit by a car or God knows like a disease that, it's not in my control. But if I can keep moving and keep riding bikes and walking, then I want to keep doing that for as long as possible. I don't ever want to stop. And so you will see what happens with that.
One of the things, Danny, that I do with people, because right out of the gate, people go into resistance mode and they go, I don't have time. Kim, I absolutely don't have time. I mean,
Yeah, I'll
and
say BS to that one.
exactly.
A big old BS.
Let's
A
do call
BS
BS.
sandwich getting served up.
It
Look
is.
at your phone.
That's what
Look
I
at the
have them
apps that
do.
you.
I have
Yes.
them go to the settings,
Uh,
Danny. I walk them through it. The crowd just panics. And I'm like, we're going to settings. Now you're going to go
yeah.
down to screen time. Now you're going to go
Yeah.
down and you're going to see how much time you're spending on your apps. And this is not to shame you. This is
Yeah.
to show you
It's called
every day, are
awareness.
we choosing
Yeah.
activities that drain us or that fuel us?
Yeah. And those, you got to have time again for leisure. And listen, I play video games. So don't hear that like I don't do stuff or just lounging around. But all that, like especially those apps, like they don't make you feel better about yourself, right? And so it's just like, no, I have a mentor, Matthew Dix, who is an educator. He's an elementary teacher, but he's also a legendary storyteller. Coincidentally, he's also worked with the FBI, Kim. So that's really interesting. Um, but one of the great sort of like coaching ideas that he challenges me and people that listen to him with is like, what would your 100-year-old self think of the choice you're making right now? Right?
Yes.
Yeah. He's going to be happy that I'm riding the bike or taking the walk or playing or whatever versus, scrolling through social media. Like the 100-year-old me wants what's best for me, right? And to be the optimize, like, yeah, just the best version of Danny. That's all I'll say. So,
Yeah. And I think that, I mean, I can totally, right now I'm trying to wean myself. I've got like my timer set, to be honest with you, Danny. It's a slow time of year. So like I give
yeah,
myself 55 minutes on social media, but like I don't feel good having, like, I'm checking it too much. And so
yeah,
my son recently sent me a TED talk. I posted it on LinkedIn, and it was by Dino Ambrosi. And he has a TEDx talk called The
mm,
Battle for Your Time,
mhm,
Exposing the Cost of Social Media. And he shows you this graph that says, this is the amount of time you have left. Here's how most of us are spending it. And here's how much we're spending on screen time. So I watched that yesterday, and Danny, we we have to have this filter of other education coming in, because today I'm like, I'm clocking it out. Like, I'm going to give myself my timer 20 minutes today. And I don't care how much my brain wants me to hit ignore, ignore, ignore. I am not going to do it, because I know too that I am too addicted to checking these platforms, and that it's not the best use of my time. Yeah, I can lounge around for 20 minutes in the morning and catch up on Facebook, and that's fun. But like, I too have found that I have to recalibrate myself. And so we're all students learning and working. None of it. I always tell people, like, I'm not a happiness guru. I'm a happiness practitioner who
Yeah.
fails over and over again, but constantly also knows how to recalibrate her life, you know?
Mm, yeah. So we kind of dove deep into sort of like movement, and
Yeah.
I don't know if I missed any. I don't think
I
we had
only
time
gave
to
you
like,
one. I only gave you
yeah.
one of the
But could you
five.
just could you highlight at least the other four? Not necessarily like dive into
Yeah.
them, but like
Yeah.
what are the other four?
Well, one of my favorite ones is the topic is the practice of gratitude, Danny.
Yeah.
I know it's a simple 2-minute daily practice, but if there's one thing that's going to change your life over and over again, the feedback I get from this says, Kim, this one tiny little habit works wonders in my life. And so I'm quickly going to tell you that, and then I'm just going to tell you the others. But like, as
Okay.
humans, we have about 70,000 thoughts a day,
Yeah.
Danny. And of those 70,000 thoughts a day, if you're an average human being, what we know is that 80% of your thoughts are negative. It's
Yeah.
just how
Right.
humans are wired.
Hmm.
And so, what happens is when we create a daily gratitude practice, which means you write down 3 different things that you're thankful for every single day, you begin to create a new neural feedback loop in your brain. And what this means is you begin to go throughout your day, and more good than bad is constantly pinging because your new default network is looking for the good versus the bad. And so
Hmm.
I tell people this was a happiness habit that we did in my 4th grade classroom. We started every day with 90 seconds of gratitude, and in 2 minutes' time, we had 27 gratitudes. At the end of the day,
Nice.
they pulled their notebook out. They wrote the words, I am thankful at the top and the date, and they wrote their 3 gratitudes. And I will tell you, it's like it works wonders. And so it is one of the
Mhm.
top 5 happiness habits. It takes 2 minutes a day. It changes your life. The third
Yep.
one is the practice of meditation. Okay.
Mm.
And let me tell you, Danny, I'm like a wound up person. Like, I work out, I do weightlifting, I run miles and miles a week. I do meditation. Like, I do all of this. And this version of me is still pretty high strung. And so I have taken on the practice of meditation, and it has helped me, but it's a top 5 happiness habit. And you only need 2 minutes a day again on that one. It's not like you have to sit in
Mm.
this chair, and we make too much of it, but it's a simple practice of grounding ourselves, getting ourselves regulated for the day. And then the fourth one is the power of social connections. So it's the
Mhm.
relationships we have in our
Yeah.
lives, it's the relationships we have with the people we work with. And the fifth one is random acts of kindness. Those are the top 5. And so what I tell people is like, I am somebody who still has struggles and still has problems, but I will tell you, Danny, that when I read this research, when I started practicing the happiness habits, I am living proof that I have elevated every single area of my life when I learned, one, that I was deserving of happiness, that I could carve out time in my day that was specific for Kim Strobel. And I learned to prioritize it, that it needed to be a non negotiable part of my day.
I love it. Thanks for going over those
Yeah,
habits.
you're welcome.
So at the end of the show, I have the same 3 questions for all the guests, and I'd love to ask you those. Kim, if you could put one message on all school marquees for a single day around the world, what would your message be?
Well, I was thinking about that question, and I think I said it at the beginning. It would be that happy teachers plus happy students equal happy schools. And that when we learn to prioritize our happiness and we create a culture where that's the driving force, then the magic that can be made, the fun that can be engaged in, the risk that we can take, the relationships that we can nurture, all of that really does blossom.
Let's talk about your dream school. If you were building it, there were no sort of limitations. The only constraint was your ability to imagine. What would be the 3 guiding principles of this dream school?
I noticed that my cousin's little boy goes to this really amazing school out in California, San Luis Obispo, and it's outdoors. He's playing with farm animals. He's climbing on rocks. He's falling. He's taking risk. He's exposed to nature. So I think a big core component, Danny, would be the ability to recreate environments that we get kids out of the classrooms, we get them immersed in nature, we
Mm.
get them moving, we get them, taking risk. I feel like that would be a core piece. The other would be, I don't know if you've seen Ken Robinson's TED Talk, Schools Kill Creativity.
Mhm.
But in my magical imagination school, it would be more personalized learning is taking place. I think there's too many students leaving our schools and they're feeling like they're not enough because the things they're good at, Danny, aren't measured in school. And
Mm.
so I would like to create spaces for people who have all different kinds of intelligences to be able to explore those pathways. And I was listening to, I think her name was Dr. Ann or Annie, and she was on your podcast a few episodes ago. And
Mhm.
she was really talking about, like, if you're interested in YouTubing, then you have an entire trajectory helping you learn how to launch your
Yeah.
YouTube
Yeah.
business. And you're not taking some of these other courses that really aren't going to be that valuable to you. So, that would be the second thing. And then the third thing would be play and fun. I think that
Mm.
has been stripped right out of the curriculum at times. And I think that's what brings, fire and passion and fuel to what we're doing.
Right on. So we covered a lot of ground today, Kim, of everything we discussed. What's the one thing you want a ruckus maker to remember?
I'm going to go back to, I may have mentioned this to you on our pre-interview, but I think it's that, I don't remember you even knew who said it, but it's to be the purple cow, to be the
Oh,
maverick.
Seth Godin. Yeah.
Yeah. Is it Seth? Okay. Yeah. To be the
Mhm.
purple cow, to be the maverick, and to have the courage to do things differently. Because when you do things differently, you ignite change. You change how the organization operates and how the people are showing up and the opportunities that kids have. So I always say this, you got to play the game of school. I'm a realist. You got to play the game of school, Danny. But when you're in that classroom, you can bring fun, creativity, innovation, all of that. You can infuse that into your lessons to make that magic.
Hey, Ruckus Maker, thanks again for pressing play. I hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as I enjoyed creating it for you. And before you go, if today's show shifted something in your mind or sparked an idea about how you could do school different, then I think you'd be a great fit for what we call the Ruckus Maker Mastermind. The Mastermind's a private community of innovative school leaders who meet weekly to grow, reflect, and disrupt the status quo. You can create the campus experience your staff and students deserve. Applications are now open, and go to betterleadersbetterschools.com/apply to put your application in.